Okay. All right, so welcome to the PatternFly demo. We have a number of things on tap. Probably won't take too long today, but we still want to go through a PF4 and some PF3 additions. And Kyle's up first with toolbar design.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the toolbar. Toolbar is pretty basic, largely following a lot of the interactions that exist in PatternFly 3. I'm sure everybody's familiar with. There's some limitations with PatternFly 3. We didn't consider a lot of things when we created that originally. There wasn't the use case of like a hybrid list or just a straight table. We also didn't have the use case of removing that toolbar and putting it maybe in the top of the page, and in conjunction having it in the actual table itself. So trying to think of something, one that's more modular and that can fit in all of those places. So what I did was broke it down to 3 different levels. One is the top bar with all the filtering functionality and the actions, just like we have now in different view selectors. Then you have the row below, which is going to show your filter chips. I came up with a new design for the filter chips so we can differentiate from like a lozenge or a badge. Right now we use the same visualization for everything. We need to differentiate for several reasons. Pagination you can find here. We're still working on the functionality of this or the interaction, but trying to just keep everything really simple. And then the column headers here, and the functionality of selecting all checkboxes or deselecting them. And you can see what those look like when you add them all together here. So we can add and remove any one of these rows depending on whether or not you have the column headers or have the filter functionality, and it will work in any situation. And then breaking that down a little further, here we're removing the filter functionality, and we still want to show the number of results, so I'll move that here. And then again, keeping your column headers, and then there may be a situation where you don't have any of that functionality, no view toggling, and you're just going to use this simple filter. I also come up with an alternate visualization, which mirrors what we had done for the login, where we're just using a single underline, which is something we try to do when there's a box within a box. And also this one is using label above, which is something I stole from the Insights team. So if we needed this functionality, we could do it, and it fits really well within a page, a single page, which I'll show. You can see here fitting above the table design, the hybrid list design, which SJ is going to present. And then just a simple layout with the table, a couple actions. Trying to keep it really minimal, light, and then keeping the typography all consistent. So this is possibly what it could look like if there was a hybrid list within a page itself, and then just connecting it to the top. And this would be the case if you had like other lists there or other content you want to connect to the top of the content. And then here you can see we're connecting it to the top of the page. Like if you want to have other content here, you don't want this connected to this table, you can remove it and then place it up here. And then the next thing we'll do is just have to rectify like when you use this alternate styling, and just figure out all those details. So that's really it for the toolbar. Interactions largely stay the same. Anybody have any questions about this?
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. SJ, you here? Let's see.
Yes.
All right. Table view.
Okay. All right. So I presented it on table view last demo, but I've been working with Kyle this sprint to just refine little details. So there are a few subtle changes from last time. So for this is just the standard list view, and nothing much really changed here. One thing Kyle and I did was just to simplify all the type within the table, the various table views, so they're all consistent. The type sizes are all consistent. So as you can see here, the row title and description 16-point font, and then any subtext would be 14. This is the responsive state, so a mobile view for the list view. And the big change here is just within context, it expands the full width of the screen. So last demo, there's padding around the table, but there's no need for that since there's very limited real estate to begin with. So it just spreads across the whole full screen. Next is the hybrid table view. So this is hybrid between a list and table. Column headers, we have 14 point, and then again, all the type is the same size within the rows. We switched out using a ghost button, so it looks more like a link instead of an actual button within the rows, just to simplify it, and started playing around with column reordering. There's two examples here, utilizing the blue bar, which we have in PatternFly, and just utilizing the caret icon to switch the order. You can also see pagination is added at the bottom of the table. And again, the expanded row view, this didn't really change. And again, with the responsive, so it expands the whole width of the page. One change that Kyle and I discussed. So previously, this checkbox was left aligned at the top of the row. We're suggesting to align it with the kebab icon. So right aligned. And again, the button is changed to a ghost button. And lastly, we have the table view, standard table view. Again, utilizing the ghost buttons instead of traditional buttons. And for here, the standard type size within table view has been decreased to 14 rather than 16, just because since there's less padding between all the rows. And I think that's it. Okay. Any questions? All right. Thanks, everyone.
Do you have a question or?
How do you determine what width your table should be on the page based on?
I'm sorry.
Or...
I'm sorry. What was that question? I couldn't hear.
Yeah. So is it, how do you determine what the table width is on the page?
So Andres and I have been working on the page layouts, which we can talk about in a moment. But there should be able to take these tables and fit them into those layouts. They should be flexible enough to scale depending on, if you want it to go the full width of the screen, it can. Probably we should recommend some best practices, but the good news is they're flexible enough to accommodate whatever we would like. So, like I said, we probably need to make some best practices for that. Generally, in the designs we've been doing, like the goal ratio, like the 2/3 of the screen, and then limiting it once it gets out to like 1920. So we probably need to document that.
Any other questions?
Kyle, I have one question, Dana.
Sure.
There is a pagination. There's a small observation. There is a pagination in the Kyle design. It is on the top right. And
Yeah.
then yeah.
Yeah, I think, and it's probably a matter of just putting those things together. I think we do want to allow the option for having the pagination both on the top and the bottom. I think that users will more easily find the pagination from the top.
I don't think we had a very good example showing the benefit of that either. The benefit happens when there's like 200 things shown versus the 5 that we just had in our mockups. And then seeing that in the context of the page. So if you want to do your filter, you have the pagination develop at the top,
Right.
Which is what was included with Matt's interaction.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. So.
And the two paginations right now, two are fine, so it's the same.
Yeah, SJ and I are working at the same time, so we got to merge it.
All set on table view? Okay, thank you. Onto the CSS section, Matt Nolting. You want to talk about Smart Grid Edition?
I do. So I have to share a pretty powerful and really kind of simple addition we made to the grid system, which we've coined the Smart Grid. The difference between this and our previous iteration is that now you can define your grid items or your columns on the grid container rather than having to do that on each grid item. So this is an example of that, and it's all responsive. So at the XL breakpoint, everything is one column. And as we scale down, we go to 2, 4, 6, it splits, and then you're at 12 column. So there's that, and there's also an example of overriding that setting on a grid item specifically. So the first 2 grid items are set to span 8, 4, and 6. So we can look at that, split down to 4 and 8 here, and the rest of the grid items are all 6. And we split it the opposite direction, and now we're down to 12. So yeah, we just kind of recognized that it would be a lot easier if all of the columns are going to be the same width. Excuse me. Be much easier to set that on the container rather than the items. So that's what I have. Any questions?
Is that just an alternate way of specifying the classes on the container? It's not the new way. Like in general, you could do.
Yeah, you can do either or. It's just a little bit more concise to specify your columns on the container. So you can
Matt,
still use.
Yeah, just like a dumb question, kind of in line with Mike. Is there a way to show what like the Bootstrap version of this would have looked like, and then show how we would migrate to this grid system, like a before and after?
I don't think that's the idea, right? We don't want people to use the grid system like if it was Bootstrap.
Yeah, it's fundamentally different in that you no longer have to rely on rows, right? You still have to rely on rows in Bootstrap.
No, but I feel like there will be some training on how, like how to think about this grid system so that they think about it differently, right? If it's fundamentally different, that's fine. But show like, hey, this is how you would have built it, but this is how you're thinking differently about the new grid system as part of our upgrade documentation.
Well, the first thing to know is that we don't want users to use the grid system unless they want to build the grid. So those are cases, for example, on dashboards. I guess dashboards are the only use cases for that. Other than that, there are page layouts and splits and other layouts that they should use instead. They are more prescriptive and they will get more consistency out of them. Now, the addition that Matt Nolting is showing is in the case that you want to have all the columns the same. So instead of specifying in each column the size, you just specify it on the parent and then they will all be the same.
Okay, so I think maybe then. No, after you, Jen.
So Andres, I think Dana's point is developers are just human nature is to do what you're familiar with, and Dana's just looking for, how do we make this something that a developer would think about and understand how to use it since it may be new to folks, and that's what he's asking for.
Yeah. So maybe Bootstrap ones, but then with the better layouts, the other layouts where you say, hey, this is how it may have looked in Bootstrap. This is how it's going to look, but use not grid, but use a page layout or use something else to teach them.
Okay.
Andreas, just what you said, I would write that down, like put that somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely need some guides to recognize that, but like there is no exact correlation between Bootstrap grid and what we are offering here, even though this is a 12-column grid system, and it basically works the same, except from the fact that there are no columns, there are no rows, it's just like auto wraps. And we don't want to try to create these 12 columns grid,
Yeah, but
right?
from a 100-foot view, this looks the same.
Because it is the same, right? If you strip away the concept of rows, then you still have the concept of columns. I mean, not exactly this example that Matt is showing now, but if you look at any other example on the grid that we built, they say, okay, like this is a, I don't know, 6-column, 8-column, 12-column. But then this is just an artifact to make it easier to write grids if you want all the columns to be the same.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, because it's a demo, we probably won't dig too deep into that now. So this is something that we'll follow up on. And this is only a compliment, guys, because what we're seeing is things that look like we can start building an application with. So that's what this is, just that energy coming out of that. So this is great. And I think along your next section, Andres, about page layout, it kind of goes right into that. Is that, Matt, unless there's anything else you want to show, should we just jump into that section?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, Andres.
So let me share that. So this is the page layout, and these cards in here, they don't belong to the page layout, that's the gallery. So the page layout has a header that is divided into 2 parts whenever you are on a large screen, then a navigation, and then a main area. And then the main area can have either dark content, light content, or gray sections. And then this whole sidebar can be hidden, so you could collapse it and it looks something like this. This is responsive. And when it is responsive, it reaccommodates the parts on the top. So a user wouldn't have to think about how to place stuff. They would just place their information within this layout, and this handles everything else. And I guess to comment out with the grid would be used within here instead of the gallery layout. So if you want to build the dashboard, then you would use the grid here.
Does the top header fix on scroll, or are we having that scroll with the content?
Which top? This one here?
The one above that, the PF-C-context, all of that up there, like when you scroll, or I mean, any of it, I guess. How
so
far?
If it's fixed or not, I don't know.
So,
I mean, I guess that hasn't been defined yet, right? That's a question for Kyle, if it's going to scroll or not. So far, it doesn't. I mean, it scrolls with a page, but we can change it. And at this point, this is like a different section, a different div container, and these all built with grid, except from the header that is built with flex, because this horizontal nav here needs to go to the end of the order whenever you go down to mobile devices here. So that's a good question for designers to decide.
Okay.
Thanks, Andres. Anything else on page layout?
Not for me, no.
Okay. All right,
So
Sarah.
just to like reference back, this is not built with the grid, right? It's built with CSS grid as a like in the implementation. So that's where the things start to change from PatternFly 3 to PatternFly 4. In this case, we are not using the grid to build everything. We just use the grid to build the parts that needs to be a grid.
This is not really a criticism or anything, but I do just want to throw out there for at least to keep in mind when if we do fix the headers and fix the sidebar, which I think will be useful, and I'm hoping that that's the case when we go that way. The scrolling, I think we'll want to try to keep as a full page scroll, not just the main content that's kind of down where this is a card, is because it is common for certain applications, and it may even have accessibility like implications as well. Some applications will want to listen to scroll, and it's really hard if it's in a nested div instead of on the window. So just something to keep in mind. So like for this page layout, if the whole thing's in grid right now, and maybe there is a way, I just don't know, but fixing the header and fixing the nav bar, it may be hard to do if the whole thing's grid, and we do have to fix them. So just something to keep in mind.
All right.
Okay, thanks. I think Sarah's up next with 3 amazing items. Utility guidelines, drop down, typography for accessibility.
Pretty small. So you're not seeing it. Okay. So the first one is just an update to the guidelines that added in a little bit about utilities that are just getting added, and then it moved demos down as being something that's a little bit different than a component, and clarified that accessibility should be done at the component level and not the demo. So just a few little clarifications in the guidelines documentation. The second one is a little bit of an update to the dropdown. The dropdown did have a gray background and no shadow, and it had an angle bracket for the toggle. So it's been updated to use a box shadow with a white background, and then the little built-in caret icon. That's still in PR. There's a little bit of cleanup to do on the box shadow to get it to match. And the third thing is an update to some typography to increase the compliance with accessibility guidelines. There were 3 things: change the black color to different black. Make sure that wherever we have blue text, it's a blue 300 on top of black with blue on black. It should be blue 300. And wherever we have blue text, it should be semi-bold. And the decision was made to actually just go with semi-bold for all the button text. So that's what you get to see here. It's probably not going to show up over blue jeans, but if you look at the primary button, when you switch to black, it's actually a lighter blue that shows up on top of the black. It also happens here at the link button. There are a few other places that are kind of hard to see. It shows up on content links, navigation links, goes off of blue text. That's it.
That's it. Right. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So then the React work has been happening in parallel, or starting to get full speed on that. So we have a couple of demos in that section. Is Amy here? Let's see. Yep, there's Amy. Yes. I don't know if you want to talk about the alignment layout.
Yeah, share my screen. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay. So this sprint, I worked on the alignment layout for PatternFly for React based off of the alignment layout in PatternFly for Core. So for the alignment, displays the content aligned to the left, to the center, and to the right. And down below are the props that the component accepts, the prop type, and the defaults. The PR is up and should be merged soon. The link is in the doc if anyone wants to take a look. And that's pretty much it for me.
Great, thanks, Amy.
No problem.
Then, yeah, code mods.
All right, let me figure out here. Sorry, I was kind of typing on some stuff, so trying to figure out. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a couple different things here. So as part of one thing, can you guys see the demo app? Okay, cool. So one of the things that we've got here is the demo app. Patrick and Amy have been working on it and updating it to include some extra things, extra views, and what's nice. And one of the ways that we're going to kind of do, especially from PatternFly React to the new PatternFly React with 4, one of the main avenues of upgrading that we've planned is code mods. And we did a survey, and there's actually still quite a lot of people that don't understand what code mods are even. So we use the term code mods, and it really doesn't get us anywhere because they don't know what that means. So I wanted to demo. I've got a PR up now for a code mod that will actually switch buttons. So we've just got the demo app here. As for changes, all I've done is add in the new PatternFly React. I'm importing our base CSS, and then I've just updated some build scripts because it wasn't working on my machine. So we've got that, and here's the code. So what a code mod does, and I'll make this a little bit bigger if I can. There we go. So what a code mod does is it allows us to analyze code and then make updates based off that. So I've got a code mod here. It's just I'm hitting my local directory, and I've done I put -d at the end there. What that means is dry run. So what I'll do is I'll run it, and I can see that, you can see I just ran it before to make sure it worked. I can see that at least one of my files here has an unsupported prop. So our code mods don't support everything that Bootstrap does because PatternFly Next does not have a button size prop. So from here, it's not going to change that at all. It would leave that file alone and let the user kind of determine what to do based off of that. So now that I've done that, I'll go to that here. I can see that the size of large, I don't need it, so I don't really care too much of it. So I'll go ahead and just get rid of it, and then I'll rerun my dry run here. And then I can see at the end that I'll have 4 files that would be updated if I ran this. So I'll just go ahead and run it again without the dry run. And then now it's actually going to make changes to those files. So not only is it going to update to the new PatternFly React core, it's going to update every one of the buttons to the correct types that actually match PatternFly 4. So now when I go to my application, I've updated all of the buttons in each of these. So the list view has its buttons. The empty states now have the primary buttons in there. And then I think there's one more. And now the toolbar here has its primary button as well. You can see they actually kind of fit in pretty well. I think this is the only one that really kind of, its sizing's off because all of this sizing's off. As we get more components, that'll kind of change. So this is in pull request right now. We'll be hopefully going in soon, and then people can consume it as they see fit. And then as we add new components, we'll add code mods for those as well. That is it.
Nice. I like that one. Because I put Doug on the spot and asked him 20 minutes ago if he wanted to demo something. So that was a last minute demo. It came across well. All right. And I think that also goes in really nicely with the next. These are all fitting together with Matt's Carlton section. So if the code mod's used and you end up with a site that looks like what Doug just showed, we've been thinking about how can we then make it look like PatternFly 3. So I'll let Matt talk about that.
Okay, yeah, let me share my screen. I'm basically just going to show this doc that I've been putting together that outlines one kind of approach that we're investigating when it comes to like migrating from 3 to 4. So the idea here is to have a theme that possibly ships with PatternFly 4 that could be applied. So an application has PatternFly 3 and they bring in PatternFly 4. They could apply this theme to the PatternFly 4 components, and it would visually bring it more in line with PatternFly 3. So then they would have that ability to bring in PatternFly 4, but still have their existing code base in PatternFly 3 and upgrade and migrate as they can. So basically what I've been doing with this document is just investigating that and seeing how viable that is. I'm not going to read through this whole doc, but definitely if you have a chance, feel free to jump into it and read through it. I've outlined generally what the theme will do and what our approach is as far as globally trying to reset everything, and then as well as what we'll have to do on a component level to make sure everything is as in line as possible. And through this process, I did kind of take the steps of seeing what it would look like to reset the global variables in PatternFly 4 to make them look more like PatternFly 3. And I also pulled out a couple components and tried to retheme those to bring them more in line. And so through that process, I definitely had questions that came up because of that, which I've documented here as well. So if you have questions, they may already be in here. If they're not in here, please feel free to add them, because I think this is a really good opportunity to get feedback. This is just a first draft, but I think it's a fairly good option as opposed to other ideas that we've been kicking around. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, definitely feel free to read through it. That is it.
Any questions on this one? This one's takes a little while to digest. So I'll pause for a second. So what I think it would be really cool is to take Doug's demo to then one step farther, apply the mod, and then go and show it with the buttons in PF4, and then add the theme view to PF3 and show them switch back. So that's really our full end-to-end story of how a project's going to update if they're using React. So that maybe that's something we can, once we maybe get the buttons ready with that, Matt, we can see, can we then tie that all together? That's going to be pretty powerful. That's a really powerful story. Okay, any other questions, thoughts, feelings?
I had a question on that. What is the, I guess, are there plans of how long we'll want to support that and how many components? Obviously, I know it's a needed, and I think that's going to be one thing that a lot of people that are going to utilize it will ask is, how long will this be supported? How many of the components will be all of them? And then at what point do we stop making this for the new components as well? Because it is kind of a maintenance thing that just adds that extra level for every component we implement. We now also need to reskin it as PatternFly 3 and what that kind of process looks like as contributors.
Yeah, I have questions in there kind of around that. I'm going to refine it a little bit based on what you just asked, because that's a great question. I don't have the answers. I don't know, Dana, if you have thoughts on that, but it's definitely something that we need to think about, because it's not. One question I have around this is kind of like how visible is this thing? We don't necessarily want to set up a scenario where people are leaning on this really heavily and just saying, oh, we don't have to update our existing code base. We can just use this and we're good to go, because we don't want that. So it's a matter of figuring out how to approach that.
Not really a problem. I mean, I think most people that go into PatternFly 4 are already committed to changing their code base.
Yeah.
So having PatternFly 3 look and feel is really about just making sure that we do a timed upgrade products that are in a way that doesn't kind of create chaos between products that you work together.
Yeah, it's probably not as bad a crutch as we're thinking, because people are going to want to have a cleaner code base over time. So all the teams we've been talking to are interested in committing to a full upgrade, just not all at once. Or if they need to use this, then it could be, like they don't ever want to upgrade. They just want to know, like, what do they, if they're going to get a new page or a new component, how will they use it? So this is not going to be a short-term commitment, though. We're not looking at like a 3 to 6 month commitment. This is a long-term effort that's going to really instill confidence in in the future. So I don't know what that time looks like. Well, let's see. Okay. Anything else on that? On that one? All right. Just one quick update on the workspace that I had that I'll just show. Let me just get it ready. Find where that is. There was a request for. Let me show my screen. There was the request for a new utility section, which Sarah mentioned as far as adding documentation for it. And I have to click start sharing. I got bit by that too. So you'll see I put a sample utility in. This will go away as soon as it's replaced with the one that's actually real. But as part of that work, in addition to the new section on the workspace for utilities, we also now have the ability to add descriptive content for each example. So if whoever's working on this says, oh, I want a little bit of extra text that's just about this example and doesn't really belong with all of the documentation, that can be added optionally for each area. And there's still more requests around making sure that the examples can be clearly documented. So this is, it just goes in a markdown file that's included. So that enhancement was made as well. And we also did an exercise in the last sprint to make sure we cleaned up all of our naming of files in the workspace. So the code is now consistently named and being imported. So that should help with new things being added as we go forward. So that was briefly just a workspace enhancement, and then I think that covers it. That covers everything for PF4. A lot of good updates, and then there was one update on PF3 that we had in the doc from Jen related to vertical nav. I don't know if you want to cover that.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hey,
Here you are.
So for PatternFly 3, the vertical nav, the issue that I worked on was just a really small update. So I'm using the tab key to go through the action so you can kind of see this has focus. As I go through the previous version, there was an underline that would display under the text and also the icon. So the update was just to remove that underline. Very small change. That was it.
Okay, thanks, Jen. And just demonstrating our commitment to PF3. So nice to see those bug fixes. I think that covers it for our demo. Anything else before we just talk about the survey briefly? Okay. So I'm just going to put a link. You know, we've been doing this with this is a link to an updated survey for this demo and PatternFly work for this past sprint. Encourage as many as possible. Please take a few minutes. We appreciate the feedback and regular communication. And that is it, unless anyone has any questions or anything additional for now. All right, now we'll stop recording.